Imagine this. You stand at the edge of a precipice, the wind howling around you, a storm cloud gathering on the horizon. Before you stretches an abyss, vast and unknowable. And yet, something compels you to step forward. You take one step, then another, and another, until you are standing on the edge, eyes fixed on the chasm below. And then the question hits you like a thunderclap. What if I fall? It's a question we all ask ourselves. What if we fail? What if the path we take, the dreams we chase, the hopes we dare to nurture all crumble beneath us? The fear gnaws at the edges of our thoughts, and the stakes feel impossibly high. The fear of failure, subtle yet paralyzing, has gripped the hearts of humanity for centuries, quietly dictating our decisions, our relationships, and our very self-worth. It whispers in our ears when we try something new, when we face the unknown, and when we dare to expose ourselves to the judgment of others. It tells us that failure is not just a possibility, but a certainty lurking in the shadows, waiting to catch us when we're at our most vulnerable. But what if the very thing we fear, the fall, holds the key to the one truth that could set us free? What if failure isn't the enemy? What if the fear of failure itself is the thing holding us back? As you stand on the edge of your own metaphorical precipice, what are you really afraid of? Is it the fall, or the thought of never knowing what might have been? We live in a world where success is celebrated, and failure is stigmatized. But success, as we are taught, is often an illusion, a constructed narrative that only comes with its own set of limitations, its own set of rules. What if the very rules we've been living by are nothing more than chains? What if the fear of failure is the greatest cage we've ever built, and we've been too terrified to escape it? This paradox, the fear of failure that keeps us trapped in place, yet pushes us towards success, is the great contradiction of our existence. And it raises the question, what if fear is the thing that keeps us stuck, but overcoming it holds the key to our liberation? But before you can answer that, you need to understand why this fear exists in the first place. Why do we let it control us? Why does it feel so powerful, so real? Hold up, before we continue, if you're ready to stop letting fear control your life, and start embracing failure as the key to your success, hit that subscribe button, and join the revolution. Don't miss out on more powerful insights that could change everything. To understand why the fear of failure grips us so tightly, we must first recognize that it's not simply a passing emotion or a trivial reaction to challenging circumstances. This fear is deeply embedded in the human psyche, rooted in our evolutionary biology, our culture, and the very fabric of our identity. Psychologically, the fear of failure is a natural response to the threat of loss of status, loss of safety, and perhaps most devastating of all, the loss of self-worth. From a biological standpoint, failure has historically been tied to survival. In our distant past, failure to hunt, to gather, or to protect oneself could mean death. Thus, the fear of failure isn't just emotional. It is primal, hardwired into our instincts. Failure was, and still is, seen as a sign of weakness, and in a world where survival was paramount, weakness was dangerous. But in today's world, where physical survival is less of a daily concern, this fear persists, albeit in more abstract forms. We fear failure not because it endangers our physical lives, but because it threatens our identity. Our sense of who we are, the very essence of our self-worth, is built on a foundation of external validation, success, achievements, and accolades. The failure of any of these becomes a deep personal affront, a wound to our sense of self. Failure, in this context, is no longer just an event, it becomes an existential crisis. Philosophers like Friedrich Nietzsche and Jean-Paul Sartre have long grappled with these questions. Nietzsche, in particular, explored the idea that our obsession with success and the avoidance of failure are symptomatic of a deeper crisis in meaning. We live in a world that demands results, that rewards the successful and punishes the unsuccessful. This drives us to constantly seek validation, to construct identities based on our accomplishments, rather than on our inherent worth as human beings. And in this search for validation, we imprison ourselves. For as Nietzsche warns, when we are too attached to external validation, we surrender our autonomy, allowing society to dictate our self-worth. Sartre, too, illuminates this existential struggle. In his philosophy of existentialism, he posits that human beings are condemned to be free, meaning that we are constantly faced with choices and the responsibility of defining ourselves through our actions. But with freedom comes an overwhelming weight, the fear of making the wrong choices, of failing to live up to our own potential. Sartre's fear of failure is not merely about making a wrong decision, it is about confronting the terrifying reality that we alone are responsible for shaping our existence. This responsibility is both liberating and crushing, as the weight of the possible consequences of failure can become too much to bear. Meanwhile, Carl Jung's perspective on the fear of failure offers a more personal, deep-seated view. Jung spoke of the shadow self, the unconscious aspects of our personality that we often hide from the world and from ourselves. He argued that failure is tied to these repressed parts of ourselves, which we fear confronting. Failure exposes these hidden parts, forcing us to face the possibility that we are not as perfect, as competent, or as capable as we would like to believe. This is why, for many people, the fear of failure is so deeply entwined with shame and self-doubt. Failure doesn't just mean not succeeding, it means confronting the parts of ourselves we would rather ignore. Jung believed that true growth could only occur by integrating the shadow, by embracing the parts of ourselves we fear them. But to do so requires a willingness to face the very failure we dread. In contemporary society, these ancient fears are magnified by cultural conditioning. We are told from a young age that success is the only path to happiness. We are taught that our value is determined by the external measures of success, academic achievements, career advancement, material wealth. This constant messaging creates an environment where failure is seen as a moral failing, a reflection of one's worth as a person. It doesn't help that our society often romanticizes success while stigmatizing failure, glorifying those who have made it, and diminishing the experiences of those who have faltered along the way. But is this the entire story? Is the fear of failure simply an unfortunate consequence of our upbringing, our biology, and our culture? Or is it something deeper, something more philosophical and universal? This is where we begin to uncover a more insidious truth. The fear of failure isn't just a product of our personal histories, it is a fundamental part of the human condition itself. The existential philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer argued that human existence is defined by suffering, and that our greatest fears come from the knowledge of our own limitations. Failure, in this light, is not just an outcome, it is a reflection of the very nature of human life. We are imperfect beings, destined to fall short in one way or another. And it is this inevitability, the constant awareness that we will fail, that we will fall short, that makes the fear of failure so overwhelming. It is not just that we fear the fall, we fear the very fact that the fall is built into the fabric of our existence. The fear of failure, then, is not just a psychological defense mechanism, it is a confrontation with the deepest truths of our own mortality and imperfection. It is a confrontation with the very nature of what it means to be human. And until we understand these deeper forces at play, until we recognize that failure is not a personal flaw, but a universal experience, we will remain trapped in its grip. This is where the true breakthrough lies, in accepting failure, not as a sign of weakness, but as an essential part of our humanity. But before we can embrace this shift in perspective, we must confront the unseen consequences of our failure to overcome this fear. We often think of fear as a fleeting emotion, something that strikes in the moment and fades once the danger is over. But fear of failure, particularly when it's deeply rooted, doesn't dissipate easily. It lingers, hidden in the corners of our lives, shaping decisions in ways we don't even recognize. Its influence is subtle but insidious, silent yet profound. And it doesn't just affect isolated instances, it seeps into the very fabric of our existence, altering our choices, behaviors, and even the way we see the world. Consider for a moment how this fear affects your daily life. Every time you hesitate to take a risk, Every time you hold back from pursuing something you're passionate about, you're giving in to this hidden force. You might not even recognize it as fear. Instead, it might appear as practicality, or self-preservation, or even as the voice of reason. But when we peel back the layers, we see that this voice is not guiding us, it's constraining us. It tells us to play it safe, to avoid discomfort, to stick to what we know. It hides the truth. We are not living. We are merely existing. On a deeper level, the fear of failure creates a pervasive sense of inauthenticity. It urges us to present versions of ourselves that conform to society's expectations, rather than embracing who we truly are. In the workplace, we hide our creative ideas for fear of rejection. In relationships, we mask our true feelings to avoid conflict. On social media, we present an idealized version of our lives, carefully curated to ensure that we appear flawless, successful, and happy. We shape our identities based on the fear of failure, fear of appearing incompetent, weak, or inadequate, and in doing so, we begin to lose touch with the very essence of who we are. We become prisoners of a version of ourselves that is designed to meet external standards, rather than our own internal truth. This fear also molds our relationship with time. We rush to achieve, to accumulate, to tick off the boxes on society's checklist of success. But in our obsession with success, we forget to live in the moment. We fall into the trap of someday, the day when we'll be successful, when we'll be worthy, when we'll finally feel like we've made it. In doing so, we sacrifice the present. We delay our happiness, our fulfillment, and our sense of worth, placing them in the elusive future that may never come. We live in the shadow of our own fear, postponing the joy of living until we've made it. But as Viktor Frankl so poignantly writes, ultimately man should not ask what the meaning of his life is, but rather must recognize that it is he who is asked. In other words, we do not find meaning by waiting for success or approval. We create meaning by embracing the present moment, regardless of the outcome. On a societal scale, the fear of failure reinforces the status quo, discouraging innovation and creativity. When we fear failure, we cling to familiar patterns and ideas because they feel safer. We avoid taking risks, preferring the comfort of mediocrity over the discomfort of unknown possibilities. This is why so many people, whether they're entrepreneurs, artists, or leaders, feel paralyzed by their own potential. They don't fail because they aren't capable. They fail because they are terrified of the consequences of failing. They remain stuck in a cycle of self-doubt and self-imposed limitations, never fully realizing their potential. Moreover, societal norms and expectations only exacerbate this fear. We live in a world where success is loudly celebrated, and failure is hidden in the shadows. Failure is seen as a stigma, a mark of shame that must be avoided at all costs. From childhood, we are conditioned to fear failure, whether it's in the form of a poor grade, a failed sports performance, or a rejected job application. These early experiences of failure shape how we view ourselves and our abilities. We internalize the idea that failure is unacceptable, that it diminishes our worth as human beings. We begin to see failure not as an inevitable part of life, but as a reflection of our inadequacy. This cultural conditioning creates a feedback loop. The more we fear failure, the more we distance ourselves from it, and the more we avoid it, the more isolated we become from our authentic selves. The fear of failure keeps us from taking risks, exploring new possibilities, and fully engaging with the world around us. We trap ourselves in a reality that feels safe but unfulfilling, a reality where success is always just out of reach, because we refuse to step out of our comfort zones. But what if this fear, the fear that keeps us from embracing the unknown, that tells us to avoid risk, is not the voice of reason, but the voice of limitation? What if the fear of failure is not a protective mechanism, but a prison? It is in understanding this that we can begin to realize the unseen consequences of our fear, and how it quietly shapes our lives. The real danger of the fear of failure is not just in its direct impact on our goals, but in the way it prevents us from living fully. It stifles our growth, our creativity, and our potential. It keeps us from discovering who we truly are and what we are truly capable of. It prevents us from seeing that failure is not the end of the road, but often the very thing that leads us to the path of growth and self-actualization. But what if there's a way to break free from this cycle? What if failure, instead of being feared, could be embraced? What if we could shift our perspective and see failure as a stepping stone, an essential part of the process rather than a roadblock? What if, instead of running from failure, we learned to embrace it? What if we could see it not as the end of our dreams but as an essential part of the process? What if the fear of failure is not something to be avoided but something to be transformed into a powerful force for growth? It's time to rebel. It's time to reject the conventional wisdom that tells us failure is something to be feared, hidden, and avoided at all costs. This is the great shift in perspective that has the power to set us free. First, let's redefine failure. For most of us, failure is a dark, shame-filled word associated with embarrassment, humiliation, and defeat. But what if failure isn't the enemy? What if failure is simply a tool, an opportunity to learn, to grow, to evolve? Failure is not a reflection of your worth. It is a reflection of your courage to step into the unknown. The truth is that those who have achieved greatness are not the ones who avoided failure. They are the ones who experienced it, failed miserably, and got up again, wiser and stronger. Take the example of Thomas Edison, who failed thousands of times before perfecting the light bulb. When asked about his repeated failures, he famously said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Edison's perspective is crucial. He didn't see his failures as obstacles, he saw them as feedback. Each failure provided valuable information that guided him toward the solution. In fact, failure was not just a stepping stone for Edison, it was an integral part of his success. Similarly, the great author J.K. Rowling, before she found success with Harry Potter, faced rejection after rejection. She was told her manuscript was not good enough, that it would never sell. But Rowling refused to see these rejections as final judgments. She kept pushing forward, each rejection merely fueling her resolve to prove the naysayers wrong. She embraced failure not as a setback, but as a lesson in persistence and belief in her vision. Imagine if she had given up after the first rejection, or the 50th. We would never have the world of Harry Potter, as we know it today. These stories, and countless others, share a common thread. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is a part of success. It's the test, the crucible, the forge in which our best selves are shaped. The key to breaking free from the fear of failure is not to avoid it, but to embrace it, to see it as a necessary part of the journey, not something to be feared or hidden away. But how do we make this shift? How do we turn failure into a tool for growth, instead of a force that holds us back? The first step is to reframe our thinking about failure. Instead of viewing failure as a verdict on our worth, we must learn to see it as data, a piece of information about where we went wrong, what we can improve, and how we can do better next time. This shift in perspective is fundamental. It allows us to take the sting out of failure and see it as part of a larger, more productive process. The second step is to detach our identity from our outcomes. We are not defined by our successes or our failures. These are simply experiences we undergo. They do not determine our intrinsic value. When we start to see failure as an event, not a definition of who we are, we free ourselves from the grip of fear. This is not easy. Our society has conditioned us to tie our identity to our achievements. But when we can step back and recognize that we are more than our results, we begin to see failure through a more balanced lens. One powerful tool for detaching from failure is practicing self-compassion. It's all too easy to criticize ourselves when we fail, to fall into a spiral of negative self-talk. But self-compassion allows us to treat ourselves with the same kindness and understanding we would offer a friend. When we fail, instead of chastising ourselves, we should ask, "What can I learn from this?" Or "How can I grow from this?" This simple shift in mindset can transform how we experience failure. It no longer becomes a weapon against us. It becomes a stepping stone for our personal growth. But let's take it even further. What if, instead of seeing failure as an inevitable evil we must tolerate, we revel in it? What if we consciously choose failure, understanding that through failure, we expand our limits and stretch the boundaries of what's possible? This radical shift is something that many great innovators and thinkers have embraced. The willingness to fail boldly, to experiment without fear, to throw yourself into the unknown is the hallmark of creativity, progress, and true growth. The history of human achievement is full of examples of individuals and groups who didn't just tolerate failure, they sought it out. Take the Wright brothers for instance. They didn't simply hope to create a flying machine. They failed repeatedly, sometimes disastrously in pursuit of their goal. But each failure taught them something new. Each setback led them closer to their breakthrough. They were so committed to the idea of flying that they didn't see failure as a stop sign, but as an essential part of the process. This willingness to embrace failure is a key ingredient in breaking free from its fear. It's a mindset, a way of seeing the world where failure isn't an obstacle but a pathway to success. To break free, you must actively seek out opportunities to fail. Whether it's starting a new project, learning a new skill, or pursuing a new relationship, you must reframe your approach to failure. What if failing means I'm on the right track? What if each misstep is just one step closer to success? This radical shift, once embraced, will change everything. So how do we make this practical? How do we move from theory to action? The key is to start small and build the habit of embracing failure in small, manageable ways. Take risks that feel uncomfortable. Try things that challenge you. Create with no expectation of perfection. Fail, learn, and grow. Every failure is a small victory in disguise. Every time you get back up, you are building resilience, expanding your capacity, and moving closer to your true potential. Now that we've traveled through the labyrinth of fear, explored its roots in our psychology, and rebelled against the cultural conditioning that keeps us trapped in its grip, we arrive at the final, most powerful realization. The truth that will forever shift how you view not only failure but success, identity, and life itself. Ready? Here it is. Failure is not just a part of success. It is success itself. This may seem counterintuitive, even paradoxical. For most of our lives, we've been conditioned to believe that success is the absence of failure, that the two are opposites, standing in stark contrast to one another. We think that if we can avoid failure long enough, we'll finally reach success. But what if the opposite is true? What if success isn't a linear journey, a straight line from point A to point B? What if success is in fact a series of failures strung together, each one teaching us, shaping us, and pushing us toward our fullest potential? Consider the most transformative moments in your life. Were they all smooth, free of obstacles and setbacks? Or were they in fact shaped by moments of adversity, mistakes, and failure? The truth is, our greatest achievements often come not from avoiding failure, but from the willingness to face it, learn from it, and grow stronger because of it. It is only by failing that we come to understand what doesn't work, which in turn guides us to discover what does. Look at the most successful people in history, whether it's inventors like Edison, artists like Picasso, or innovators like Steve Jobs. Every one of them emerged more resilient, more insightful, more capable because of it. Jobs once said, "Remembering that you are going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You are already naked. There is no reason not to follow your heart." Jobs understood something fundamental, that the fear of failure is just a mirage, a fear that evaporates once we embrace the reality of our mortality and the fleeting nature of time. We have nothing to lose by failing, because in failure we gain everything that truly matters: wisdom, experience, and the courage to keep going. It's when we are no longer afraid of failure that we begin to truly live. The moment we stop letting fear control us is the moment we take ownership of our journey, reclaim our power, and chart our own course. Failure, instead of being a threat, becomes a badge of honor, It becomes proof that we are pushing the boundaries of what's possible. It signals that we are testing our limits, daring to venture into the unknown, and refusing to be defined by what we haven't achieved. We are defined by our willingness to keep trying, to keep learning, and to keep growing, no matter how many times we fall along the way. When we embrace failure, we transcend the false dichotomy that success and failure are opposites. We see that they are not separate entities but part of the same process. We understand that success is not about never failing. It's about how we rise after each failure, how we learn from it, and how we continue on the path undeterred. In the end, success is not a destination. It is the journey itself. At this point, you may be asking yourself, how can I begin to live this truth? How do I start embracing failure as part of my own journey to success? The answer is simpler than you might think. Start by reframing your mindset. When you face failure, don't focus on the pain, the shame, or the disappointment. Instead, ask yourself, what is this failure teaching me? Every failure is a lesson in disguise. Every mistake is a clue, a signpost, guiding you to a deeper understanding of yourself and your path. The key is to stop running from failure and start embracing it as part of the process. Start small. Take risks in areas of your life where the stakes feel lower. Begin a project you're passionate about, knowing that failure is not just possible but inevitable. The more you fail, the more you learn. The more you embrace failure, the less it will have power over you. As you build this new habit of welcoming failure, you'll find that your fear diminishes and your capacity for growth expands. Understand that failure is not a reflection of your worth or potential. You are not a failure because you failed. You are a person who has learned something invaluable, and that learning is what ultimately leads to success. Embrace failure as a trusted ally, as an indispensable companion on your journey to greatness. The final truth to accept is this: failure is freedom. Freedom from the fear that holds us captive. Freedom from the self-imposed limitations that prevent us from living fully. When we embrace failure, we give ourselves the freedom to explore, to experiment, and to create. We give ourselves the freedom to live our lives on our own terms, without being shackled by the expectations of others or the tyranny of perfectionism. So as you step forward into the unknown, as you dare to take that risk, that leap of faith, remember this: you are not alone. You are part of a vast human experience, a lineage of those who have dared to fail and failed to dare. And with each step you take, you add to that legacy, carving out a path that is uniquely yours. The truth, ultimately, is this: the secret to overcoming the fear of failure is not to avoid failure, but to make peace with it. In accepting failure, you unlock the power to truly live, to take bold risks, and to create the life you were meant to live. And with that, we come full circle. The fear of failure is not something to conquer. It is something to understand, to embrace, and to transform into a powerful force for personal growth. Failure is no longer the thing that defines you. It is the thing that frees you. And once you begin to live with this truth, you will discover that the possibilities are endless. The question is no longer, what if I fail? But what if I soar?